espírito, eu tô que nem ele, sem terno, sem gravata, mas eu não te ajeito.
All right. Well, I was back in the hallway, so I'm not sure what he said. I hope he said flattering things about me. Because I had dinner with him last night, and he seemed like a nice guy. I'm so thrilled and honored to be here. It's really exciting for me because it's my first time in Brazil, and I wish I could stay longer. It's also very informative for me, very educational for me, because we are just on the verge of starting to translate Twitter into other languages. So it's very important for me to visit countries that Twitter is growing very fast in, and to learn why, and to learn a little bit more about the culture, which I'm learning from Sergio and his family, because it really helps us when we make the decisions to go forward there. I'm also excited that we've just got Governor Serra verified on Twitter, so he's officially verified, which is cool. Anyways, I only have about 40 minutes to talk, so I want to tell you the story of Twitter, because it's been very interesting for us. The story of Twitter is actually lots of little stories. Each one of them opened our eyes a little bit more and showed us the potential of what we were creating, something which we didn't expect when we set out to develop it. And before that, I thought I would talk a little bit about some of the trends I've noticed, because I've been building services and tools to help people express themselves on the internet for 10 years now, starting with a service called Zanga and moving through into Google and working on Blogger. And so I've definitely noticed some trends happening in this kind of communication space, and I want to share some of those with you. I also want to share a little bit, and this was kind of inspired by Sergio last night at dinner. I want to share a little bit about myself, because obviously that's where I'm an expert. Having started out as an artist, I tend to think of everything in that light first, and then second as an entrepreneur and a technologist. And that colors the way that I approach my work very, very much. So we'll begin with, where's my slides? Do I have there's my slide. That's a photo of my wife and I about a minute after we got married. Obviously, I'm very excited. And she looks like she made the biggest mistake of her life. As far as I'm concerned, we're very happily married. I tell her that, happy mistakes are the best kind. But it's true, because Twitter was, in many ways, almost a mistake. We didn't mean to make Twitter. We were supposed to be working on something else, and we got a little distracted, and we got intrigued, and we started developing a side project, which of course turned into to Twitter. So it's very important, I think, to keep an eye out for those side projects. And one of the ways that you can keep an eye out for those side projects is by approaching things first, I think, as an artist. So I'll give you a little bit of my history first, because I think maybe it colors a little bit of my work and how I approach it. And I was telling this to Sergio last night, but I started out as an artist, mostly in painting and graphic design and some writing, and I went to university on an art scholarship. But I took a side job, moving heavy boxes, because back then I was much more fit, and I was moving heavy boxes for a publishing company in Boston, Massachusetts. And this was at a time when the publishing company, the art department, the department that designs all the book jackets for the books, they had just begun to switch from old-fashioned traditional technology to computers. And so at one lunch break, when the art department all went out to lunch, I snuck onto a computer and I designed a book jacket, and I printed it out, and I matted it up, and I slipped it in with the other book covers going off to be presented in New York City for approval. And then I went back to moving boxes. And a couple days later, the art director came back, and he said, "Who designed this book cover?" And I said, "Me." And he said, "The box guy?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, how would you like to work here? So I ended up taking a job as a graphic designer specifically focused on designing book covers. And graphic design, I think, is such a wonderful field for anyone to study, because what it teaches you, ultimately, is that creativity is a renewable resource. You never run out of creativity. There's no solution that is the only solution. If it doesn't work, you can always try again. It's renewable infinitely. And this has very much colored the way that I've approached my work, because very often we come up against problems that seem impossible. But if you think of them as problems, if you think of them as obstacles, then they become annoying and they don't become fun. But if you think of them instead like a design challenge, then all you have in front of you is different choices and different ways of going about it, and many of them are right. And so that is what makes developing software and developing these very large and open platforms for people to express themselves kind of like an art project for me, and kind of like a never-ending series of interesting puzzles to solve. And so that's how I've been able to approach things, and I think that's how I've been able to stay sane when working on a lot of these projects. Oh yeah, one other thing. I think humor is very important. Sometimes I think humor is actually a delivery mechanism for truth. These are some of the most important executives at Twitter. You wouldn't really notice by looking at them. The guy in the middle is in charge of all of our product. That's something that we very much value at our company, is humility and humor. And when we interview people, we find out, are they funny? Can they laugh? And so we have many misfits and many funny people who work at Twitter, but I think you need to have a sense of humor in order for communication to really flow freely, because so much of communication, it happens indirectly, and humor is one of those ways that communication kind of sneaks in from the side, and you understand what someone's saying on a subtle level through humor. And so that's something that I've learned in my approach as an artist and in my approach as an entrepreneur and a technologist, is that we need to have some lightheartedness and some humor. And Twitter is a fun named service, and as I'll tell you when we get into the story of Twitter, it really started out as something that we thought of as fun. So we'll get into that. So a little bit more about what I think has been happening over the last 10 years. What I said before about designing book jackets. So I started out as a graphic designer. After about a couple of years of that, I decided that I would become a freelance designer, so I taught myself web design. And that was good timing, because as I taught myself to design for the web, some friends and I decided we would start a web company in 1999 called Zanga.com, which was a very early web blogging community, kind of like a social network, but very early. And it was very good timing. So we created that, and that enabled me to have sort of an up-close and personal view of the way people are communicating over the last 10 years. And what I've noticed is a very significant change. So obviously people continue to use email, they continue to use instant messaging applications, but they're more trending now towards open communication. They're trending towards using blogging was one of the first things that they started using. And then social networking, again, opening it up more and making it more public. And now Twitter, obviously, very public. 95% of our accounts are open and public, and everyone wants each other to see their updates. And the name I'm giving to this is social alchemy, because when someone sees a tweet, an individual Twitter update, they'll often criticize it. For example, I may say that I'm enjoying a beer at the Logan International Airport at Boston at the Sam Adams pub. And someone who doesn't like Twitter, or is a critic of Twitter, will say, who cares? I don't care you have it. So you're having a beer. Why do I need to know that? But if someone else is in the airport and they get my tweet on their phone in real time, and they join me, and we sit down and we have a beer and we discuss an idea for a company that becomes very successful, then we've changed something of little value, like lead, into gold, and that alchemical reaction has taken place. And we see this happening all the time. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. For me, early on, I started writing about blogging on my blog, which was an open blog, and I was invited to write books by acquisitions editors about the subject, and that was very exciting for me. And that wouldn't have happened if I had been just sharing my thoughts over email. It was being public and letting it loose that was attracting people to me. And those are dramatic examples, but we see this every day with just very simple, sometimes social examples. So I think there's a huge value in openness, and it doesn't just stop at communication, because what we're seeing is openness and transparency from companies in government. We're seeing openness in software. I mean, open source software is hugely important. It's something that Twitter very much believes in. We open source a lot of what we create, and we use a lot of open source. And so openness is definitely becoming a trend